So today I want to tell you about Ed Orgeron's recruiting philosophy as the head coach at LSU and how he basically looks at Joe Burrow as happening because he didn't land Patrick Surtain. And all that's coming up after the bumper.
Don't be cornering me. Hold up. Time. You gotta help me with that corner shit.
What's up, kinfolk? It's RJ Young. I am not on a step milk. Consider hitting the like and subscribe button because I upload a video every single day. It's always college football related, sports related. We have a good time. Today, I want to tell you some of these stories that Ed Orgeron is telling us in this book that is called Flip the Script. It is written by Ed Orgeron, but ghostwritten by Bruce Feldman, who is one of the best college football reporters of all time. And while this book feels a little bit watered down because there is, no cussing in it, for starters, like we all know that Ed Orgeron is profane. It's all right. You could put it in the book, but I'm not sure who he was writing this for. Maybe he's writing this for his grandkids or whatnot. But there's a couple stories in here, actually several stories in here that I want to relate to you over the course of some segments, and this is one of them. And I'm going to read it at length so that we all understand what Ed Orgeron was doing here. So, this is page 160 of the hardback. The whole year, we'd emphasized locking down the state of Louisiana in recruiting. A strong crop of in-state players was coming out of that year and a bunch of must-gets. Jamar Chase was a guy we loved, as well as Terrace Marshall. Everybody wanted those two receivers. Dari Rosenthal was a huge lineman we thought could be a high draft pick in the NFL. We really liked Damon Clark, a big, fast linebacker, but we also reached on and misevaluated some local guys too. Reached too far. You get it. It's recruiting stuff. We got most of them, but looking back, I stretched too much to keep those Louisiana kids home. We took several guys I wasn't sure about, but I just didn't want to let them go to Texas or to some place far away. I learned a lesson. I'm not doing that anymore. If you don't think he's an elite player, an elite prospect, I can't take him. I can't do that to this university. We were coming up on signing day, and we thought we were going to get the top cornerback on our board, Patrick Surtain from South Florida. But we found out late the night before that he was going to Alabama. The bottom line was his daddy wanted him to play for Nick Saban and not me. I thought back on this visit to LSU. His dad had looked at me and said, I want my son to play for championships. I said, good, we're going to do that here. His face just turned. You could tell he wasn't buying it. After we found out that we weren't getting Surtain, we reached out to another cornerback, but he accepted an offer from Clemson by then. I think that's Andrew Booth. We were looking at another dual threat quarterback from Alabama who ended up picking Texas A&M. Then, when Surtain announced his choice on national TV, he said he picked Alabama because, quote, they win championships and I want to be a part of that, end quote. It felt like a big black cloud was hanging over signing day. I think the recruiting sites ranked our class number 15. Some people mocked us because we gave a spot to a kicker from a school nobody had ever heard of. But we knew we really needed a kicker, and we had been looking for the best grad transfer kicker out there. I trusted our special teams coordinator, Greg McMahon, to find one. The good thing about those NFL guys like Greg was they're true evaluators. They don't get caught up in the hype about whether someone is a, quote, 5-star guy, end quote, or whatever. Greg had heard from a young coach who kicked for me at USC, Joe Houston, about a kicker named Cole Tracy from a Division II school in Massachusetts, Assumption College, which had only about 2,000 students. In his junior year, Cole had gone 27 of 29 on field goals and 67 of 67 on extra points, and he won the Fred Mitchell Award. That went to the best kicker in 5 classifications below the FBS level. I'd never seen Cole kick until we got him, but I believed in Greg. We ended up with one unfilled scholarship spot left over. That was the spot we needed to have room for Joe Burrow. It worked out perfectly. I'd take Joe over Surtain any day of the week. We knew Joe and Cole were going to help us, but we didn't realize they would help as much as they did. I prided myself on being someone who believed greatly in my ability to evaluate people regardless of what others may have thought. Sometimes that means you're out there on the limb by yourself, and that's okay. I was convinced it was going to be worth it. I find that story to be interesting for a number of reasons, because in reading this book, you figure out just how integral Joe Burrow is, not just to the success of LSU football in 2019, but to Ed Orgeron and his success here in recent history. Like, one of the things that quarterback evaluators will take real note of in talking about NFL draft picks is how much of what this quarterback was doing in the offense was his head coach and the play calls, the system that he was playing in, or the players around him. And one of the things that becomes clear about LSU and Joe Burrow is he had the best of all of that, right? In Joe Brady and Steve Ensminger. Joe Brady taking care of third down situations and most passing situations where Ensminger calls about 80% of the offense. And they put in a new offense that took advantage of their skill players in a way that LSU never had, even as it should have. But more than that, Joe Burrow was responsible for a lot of the decision-making, not just on the field, but in as far as allowed to be a leader on that team. Ed loved him and got out of his way, basically treating himself like a big brother and saying, if Joe thinks we can do it, we're going to go try to get it done. You can't actually do that with everybody, right? And that's where being a head coach is difficult. Some head coaches know how to adapt to their quarterback situations and who their quarterbacks are going to be. I think Riley is a great example of that. Kyler Murray is an understated, cool, I'm going to get it done. Baker Mayfield is an overstated fire plug, right? And then Spencer Rattler is a little on the arrogant side, but he is cocky with good reason. He knows he's good. Riley's had to mold his personality to all of those dudes, right? And I think Ed needs a particular style of quarterback to succeed until he proves that he can mold himself into whatever that quarterback or that defense or that offense needs him to be for them to succeed. And you're seeing this year ain't going so hot. Number one, you lose 34 players off the 2019 team. Number two, you're very inexperienced. Number three, COVID. And number four, you really have had a lot to overcome outside of football. Even so, I didn't think that they were going to be that good, and I said they were going to catch 5 losses this year. But now, looking at how Ed Orgeron put together that 2019 team and how many people he needed to rely on and how many of those people are no longer there, you're really getting to see where his weaknesses still lie. And his strengths, he's leaning a little too hard into for me, right? Which is being from that place. Cool. But you holding a grudge against Patrick Surtain, that ain't what head coaches do, dog. Like, and saying, basically essentially saying Patrick Surtain for Joe Burrow, cool. Everybody makes that trade knowing what you got, a 2019 national championship. But if you don't win a national championship, do you still make that trade? Right? Do you make that trade for the Fiesta Bowl? And shouts to Patrick Surtain Sr., who's looking out for his kid and his kid's individual future in the NFL, not necessarily what somebody's going to get out of him for 3 or 4 years, which I believe is how many head coaches end up thinking of their kids, right? What is this commodity going to do for me as opposed to what is best for this person? It's an interesting anecdote that I wanted to relay to you because I hadn't heard it, and I figured if I hadn't heard it, you hadn't heard it. So there it is. Doses.